Hello and welcome to the Renaissance Polymath. I'm your host, Toby Gagnon, and on this episode, I would like to discuss firearm myths and misconceptions. Let's go ahead and get things started. Over the course of my life, I have known about, heard firsthand, and in some cases, even perpetuated some untruths regarding firearms. For the latter, I would like to plead ignorance in the purest sense of the word. I simply was uneducated. I'm still not an expert, but I would cautiously say that I have a little bit of knowledge and insight now compared to then. I've had the opportunity to learn and grow as a person and as a firearms owner, student, and instructor. If you'd indulge me, I'd like to take this opportunity to share some of the common fallacies I hear and attempt to provide the truth behind them. My hope is that these truths eventually become common knowledge, and we all won't have to worry about having to answer these anymore. So let's go ahead and dive right in. The first one is, guns are dangerous. Well, that's actually a myth, misconception, whatever you want to call it, fallacy. Firearms are actually no different than any other tool that you would have in your garage or your shed, etc. Firearms are simply inert without human intervention. Homicides are committed by humans, regardless of the means. That could be a vehicle, a blunt object, a sharp object, etc. The guns are not the dangerous part of that equation. The next is that assault weapons are the problem. There was only ever one assault weapon in history, and it was made by the Germans in World War II. Otherwise, that is simply a made-up term. Assault is a verb, and weapon is a noun. Gun laws will help. Well, unfortunately, criminals, by definition, don't care about laws, so having more laws will simply mean that the criminals will just be breaking more laws. These laws that are enacted, unfortunately, only apply to people that adhere to them, such as law-abiding citizens. Criminals are not law-abiding citizens. You can buy a gun online and have it shipped right to your door. Well, the truth is actually, while you can pay for anything online, it is a different thing entirely to take possession of it. An example would be to buy a star. Yes, of course, there are organizations online that you can go and put many thousands of dollars down and have a star named after you, or buy a star. However, it's very unlikely you will ever take possession of that. So it is actually a fallacy that you buy a gun online and it's shipped right to your door. There is a process where it actually has to be transferred through a federally licensed dealer, at which point a background check is performed. Guns are registered to their owners. Well, with only a few exceptions, firearms are actually not registered. There are certain states that do have a registry. However, that is not a federal program. Additionally, in those states where there is a registry, the firearms ownership is down, yet gun crime remains a problem, according to the politicians. Moving on, shotguns are the best choice for home defense. While ballistically superior some of the time, shotguns actually require a higher level of skill to not only operate, but to maintain than some folks realize. Also, typically shotguns are heavier and more difficult to maneuver and hold relatively low ammunition as compared with some of the other options on the market. Next, certain calibers, gun types, or manufacturers are unreliable. Well, with very few exceptions, modern-day firearms are actually extremely reliable. The manufacturing processes and the materials available are much better now than they were years ago, and only will continue to get better. Therefore, firearms, in theory, will only become more reliable. Continuing on, there is one caliber to rule them all. Well, in truth, each caliber has both strengths and weaknesses, but that doesn't mean that any one caliber is best for all situations. That is why there are so many different calibers available to firearms owners today. More years of doing it means more expertise. Well, actually, technology and techniques advance and change with time, and someone can spend time, lots of time, doing it wrong, or not being brought up to speed on modern technologies, or modern science, or modern manufacturing processes, etc. So, yes, knowledge and experience are absolutely things that you should seek. However, just because you've done it for a long period of time, or you have someone or know someone that's done it for a long period of time, does not mean they are necessarily an expert. Oh, the next fallacy. Women should use small guns, especially revolvers. This is one I think you'll hear very often, especially in gun stores. And it's often recognized that larger frame firearms are actually easier to hold and to manage. While it can be that revolvers offer a different level of reliability and simplicity, that does not necessarily mean that they are easier to use. Therefore, I would encourage any owner, regardless of age, sex, size, etc., to go and try different options that are available on the market to find what works best and most comfortably for you. Don't assume that just because you're a small female that you should use a small pink revolver. Next, silencers and machine guns are illegal to own. This will actually be its own full episode, but suffice it to say this is simply false. They are just extremely expensive and more difficult to obtain. And the last one we'll talk about today for fallacies or myths or misconceptions is you only need one gun. Well, no matter what your partner may tell you, right? Hey, don't go buy more of these things. There is actually a use occasion for different types and different calibers. So, yes, you can have one firearm that will fit the needs that you have, potentially. But to say that you only need one firearm is simply not true. Each firearm can have a different area of expertise or a different use occasion, for instance. Therefore, you would want one that best suits the needs and the desires you have for the task at hand. For the same reason you wouldn't use a sledgehammer to hang drywall, you wouldn't necessarily want a hunting rifle to perform in the shooting sports. Unfortunately, those are just the common fallacies that I have known about, heard, or for a time maybe perpetuated. There are many more, but we will save those for another more specific episode. If you have a fallacy that you've heard and want me to talk about it, please send it to me. You can send a private message on Instagram or Twitter, and links to those profiles are in the show notes below. Or you can send me an email to podcast@therenpo.com. That's THERENPO.com. That about wraps up this episode, but I would encourage you to do your own continued research and education. I'll make sure to link to anything that I may have discussed on this episode in the show notes. On the next episode, I will be discussing becoming a firearm owner on a budget of $1,000. If you have any feedback, feel free to send me an email at podcast@therenpo.com. I would also appreciate it if you left a review wherever you podcast. That helps this show be discoverable to others and helps me understand where things can be improved. Don't forget to subscribe and auto-download new episodes so you don't miss any of the future topics. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.